Okay, well, I guess we'll get on with the meeting. We've got a lot going on. So, what's next?
Warblers and skimmers have been at Celery, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Eastern
Hi, Lorna.
Texas, Charlottesville. All right, just a reminder to update your membership if you haven't. A lot of you have. Thank you. And then I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. This is our big annual election meeting. So we had sent all the nominees for the year to our nominating committee, which was Dawn and Karen Schneider, and they had all the bios. And this is our slate for next year. I'm president. Catherine Young would stay on as first vice president. Lynn would be our second vice president. And we have a new member to the board, Sindhu Dagomali. She is up for secretary. And then treasurer for 1 year only, we have Jean Doobie, who we all know and love so well. The election's going to take place via Survey Planet. So look for that right after the meeting because you have to be in attendance in order to vote. Just per the bylaws, you have to be in attendance at our monthly meeting in April. So anyone in attendance will get the survey and you'll vote. And that's how we will seat the board for next year. This is just the executive board. There are more board members that fill out the entire board, but these are the executive board who can vote on specific things. And that's all the housekeeping I have on that one today. If you have any questions, let me know. They did cancel the final native plant class with Pam Calendar. She tried to reschedule it a few times and ultimately ended up having to cancel it. So I apologize for that, but we'll make sure we have more of those next year because that's always very popular. And then kind of to close out the season, we have on April 26th, our Earth Day celebration. We're going to have some food trucks out there. We've got a lot of fun booths coming and activities for kids. So if you come see us between 9 and 2 on Earth Day, we've got a couple of walks, one at 8, another one at 9. And we may have one later. I have to double check with Helen, but I think right now it's just the 8 and 9 walks if you're interested in doing those. But come check it out. I think it's going to be a great event.
And you still need volunteers?
Yeah, volunteers. If you guys want to volunteer, that would be fantastic. We can always use people to, inside the nature center to help at the membership table. We have a little table where we sell books and stuff. So anybody who can help set up, break down, work the event, I'd really appreciate that.
I think, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop share and turn it over to Margie.
Hello, everybody. So it's my pleasure to have Tammy and Dave McQuade back again by popular request. They kindly show up for us year after year, and we're very lucky about that. So they're the renowned Florida-based national champion birders, if you don't know, and this is your first visit with us. And they're going to take us on their latest birding adventure. This time they're taking us to Panama and its rich diversity. They will take us on their journey through the Canopy Tower, the Canopy Lodge, and Canopy Camp, which are, if you haven't been to Panama, those are well, I haven't been there either, but it sounds like those are the most well-known birding places, and we'll certainly learn more about that. The McQuades have finished once again #1 in both the American I keep hearing a voice here. Does somebody else hear it? The American Ornithological Union, which is the AIU. And Dave, that's, as I understand it, that's America through Central America and part of the Caribbean. Is that correct?
And it also includes Hawaii too.
And Hawaii. Oh, cool. I felt like I should know that, but I don't. So thank you for being clearer. And so they're number one in both the American Ornithological Union, or the AIU region, and North America as top birders on eBird. And their 2024 totals were outstanding, with 1,136 species in the AIU region and 1,082 in North America. Wow. I want to be in your pocket when you travel. So Dave and Tammy were high school sweethearts. They've always had a love of the outdoors, and their lives changed dramatically in 2012 when they saw the movie The Big Year. Their idea of counting birds and deliberately targeting species had a particular appeal. So they started with a big weekend in 2013, and they haven't looked back. They've only looked ahead, and boy, have they got lists for us. I keep hearing a voice in the background. Does anyone else hear that?
I think it's just like a noise. It's more like a feedback than it
I
is
think
a
it's
voice.
your audio. So
Yeah, it's like doing a
just-
feedback thing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Everybody else is muted. So
Okay. So in eBird, they both rank, I don't know if this, maybe you rank even higher now, but they both rank number 14 all time for the lower 48, having found 799 bird species as of March 2024. They administrate the Southwest Florida Bird Alert Group on Facebook. Check it out if you haven't already. They give presentations at local birding groups and are guides at the local Cape Coral Burrowing Owl Festival. Additionally, they're graduates of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, the Macaulay Library Sound Recording Workshop. And David is on the board for the ABA, the American Birding Association, and Tammy serves on several of their committees. They love doing long-range pelagics in their 30-foot boat, the McLogic, in the Gulf of Mexico when time permits. They're both proud to have contributed to the science and data of the bird distribution in the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, and feel this is their greatest birding accomplishment. Welcome. Thank you so much that you're back to talk to us again. Is there anything you want to add to your delightful and amazing statistics before we head out?
Well, Dave's no longer on the ABA board, so I will tell you that. We're just birding and working and kind of spending time with our family whenever we can. So that's kind of all we do right now. We eat, sleep, bird, work, eat, sleep, bird, work,
And repeat.
and repeat.
And I will update our new all-time eBird ranking for the U.S. We're now up to 901 birds in the U.S. With the Amur Stone Chat on March 23rd over in Texas being our most recent addition. And that brings us up to 10th place all-time in the U.S.
Thank you very much. I can't keep up with you guys.
Okay, with that,
Well, first, we just want to thank you all for having us back. We really love talking about our adventures and sharing, and we just so appreciate that you're willing to listen to us. We made our first trip to Panama at the end of 2021, 2022. We like to do a thing where we travel to a foreign country or destination the last week of December, and then we will stay at that destination for the first week of January. That way we get birds for, both years. So it kind of gives you a 2-for-1 deal on the trip. So we do that quite often at the end of the year. So we were there in 21, 22. We absolutely fell in love with Panama. It is just such a fabulous place. And we knew we'd want to go back. We just weren't sure, when we'd go back. But fortunately, at the end of this last year, 2024, in December, we went back to Panama. And we also, of course, like I said, started 2025 in Panama there. And so tonight we're going to talk about Panama with its rich bird diversity. And specifically, we're going to talk about the adventures that we had at the Canopy Tower, the Canopy Lodge, and the Canopy Camp. Panama is a very tiny country. However, the bird diversity there is just incredible. 10% of the world's bird population can be seen in that little tiny country that's barely the size of South Carolina. You can see as many birds in Panama as you can see in the entire lower 48 of the United States. So it is an amazing place for its size. In our 2 trips to Panama, we've been able to visit all 3 of the Canopy properties. We've been to Canopy Tower twice, which is near the canal. We've been in the Canopy Lodge. We only have gone 1 time, although we would love to go back. It's a beautiful location. We were there in 2022. And then most recently, we went to the Canopy Camp, which is down in the Darien. And I have to tell you, it's my favorite, and I can't wait to share about it.
As we go through and we look at Canopy Tower, it's just an incredible place. It's a former U.S. radar station surrounded by this national park. And, you know, when a lot of birders think about Panama, you know, they think about Canopy Tower. I mean, this is the most popular place, probably the best known place for birding in all of Panama. And it really kind of sets up a perfect backdrop for people to go down there and bird. Because basically, you know, you can climb up on top of the observation deck and you can just see for miles around. And you're up at the top of the canopy, so you can see birds migrating and flying back and forth. You can sit there and see, you know, birds perching on tops of trees, and you're literally up there with the birds. So again, for a typical person that stays at Canopy Tower, you know, they're going to go through and typically start off their morning going up to the top of the tower, you know, pre-dawn, just before the sun is coming up. And you usually will bird there through breakfast. Breakfast is served 1 floor below that on the 4th floor. And, you know, even on the 4th floor, you've got these big picture windows. And we've literally been sitting there eating breakfast or lunch or dinner there. And we've had toucans come in and literally perch right outside our window. You know, it just is an incredible place to visit. Now, the tower is a very comfortable place to stay. You know, each room has its own private, you know, bath. They have ceiling fans. However, to keep up the ambiance, you know, of the property, on all 3 properties, they deliberately do not have air conditioning units there because they don't want the noise associated with an AC unit. You know, instead, they want you to be able to hear the tinamous calling at dusk or to, you know, wake up to howler monkeys in the morning. So when we first heard there was no AC, you know, this is coming from a couple who runs air conditioning in their house 51.5 weeks out of the year. There's usually 2 or 3 days we don't need it. But aside from that, we run AC 51.5 weeks out of the year, including today. So we were a little bit on the hesitant side, you know, when we heard no AC, you're down in Panama, you know, the closer you get to the equator, the hotter it's going to be. You know, how's this going to work out? And really, with the ceiling fan that we had in there, you know, we were very comfortable both trips. You know, we had 0 problems sleeping at night. Very comfortable. Again, was not an issue or was not a concern, albeit before we got there, it was. Now, the big key to understand about the tower, though, is that the rooms are on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the building. The dining area is on the 4th floor, and the observation deck is basically on the 5th floor. There's no elevator. So you have to be comfortable, you know, a couple times a day walking up, you know, potentially at least 4, maybe 5 flights of stairs, you know, to go ahead and be able to eat and, you know, go up on the observation deck to bird. So again, this is something that the average person should have no problem. But if you do, have a little bit more issues walking and going up steps, then out of the 3 locations, the tower might not be the best one suited for you. The second key to to remember about the Canopy properties is that typically you're going to be birding in a group, and if you go down there by yourself, if you don't arrange otherwise, you'll be birding with other people. Now, if you're like Tammy and I, our time is really limited and our expectations are really high. We want to get the maximum number of birds while we're there because, again, we can only take off so many days out of the year from our work. So we've got to maximize what we do. So we choose to pay a little extra and get a private guide. And again, if you've got the extra money, it's well worth it because you're going to be able to maximize the birds that you're getting, and they're going to focus on getting the targets that you need rather than trying to accommodate, maybe 6 or 8, 10, 12 people. So again, those are kind of the 2 things to kind of keep in mind, in regards to the tower. Now, again, the tower is located very, very closely to the Panama Canal. And this is a photograph I took with my iPhone, and you can see one of the ships there, literally, going across the canal. I believe this one was heading out to the Pacific Ocean from this location. So, again, you're very, very close to the tower, and again, once you kind of get through with your breakfast, you start moving out from the tower, and you start birding other areas throughout the area around the canal. And if you look at just our last trip down to the tower, you can kind of see our eBird checklist points and how we kind of have eBird points all up and down the Panama Canal, for about almost 2/3 of the canal. And again, when I say around the canal, I mean they might be a little ways off and you might not see the canal at every location. But the point is that, they kind of are running a corridor across that. Now, ultimately, one of the fun ways that you kind of get around Panama when you're birding with Canopy is what they call the Birdmobile. And the Birdmobile is this pickup truck outfitted with padded bench seats, in the back of the bed. And whenever it's safe, they'll have you hop up into the back of the Birdmobile, and they'll slowly drive down maybe like a dirt road or something like that, listening for birds. And then typically when you come across a decent flock or when you come across one of your target species, then you'll go through and stop and lots of times hop out and try and work the flock and try and, position yourself a little bit better.
As we mentioned earlier, usually most birders will bird the tower just before sunrise until breakfast. And then after sunrise, you typically drive to other locations like Ammo Pond, Summit Pond, Gamboa. A little further away, there's some parks Dave and I really like. Metropolitan Park, which is more down in Panama City. You could drive over to Serra Azul. However, I have to say our very favorite place to bird in that area is the Pipeline Road. It is an amazing place to bird. And one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to look for, as you're walking down this dirt road, you're going to look for ants. And here we have a video of some leafcutter ants that are making their way across the path. There's also army ants, and typically army ants are the ones that you really see. We just weren't able to get a video of those, but the leafcutter ants give you an idea. You're just looking for this huge swarm of ants. And when you find that swarm of ants, you're going to find a lot of great birds. Now, Pipeline Road, which is the road I was talking about, this road was made because they put a pipeline across Panama back during World War II. And they had that pipeline because they were worried that they were not going to have access to the canal. Well, fortunately, that was never an issue. And the great things for birders is that this road gives us access to a really dense jungle with great birds. And some of the birds that we see are the bicolored antbird, the black-faced ant thrush, bright-rumped attila, which is a little higher up in the canopy. Fasciated ant shrikes are a little higher up in the canopy. Everybody loves motmots, like the broad-billed motmot. You can get the Mastityra, black-tailed trogon, black-striped wood creepers. They have so many different species of wood creepers and trogons. It's just wonderful. And then another bird that we wanted to be sure and mention was this brownish twistwing. We were actually very fortunate when we were in Panama to see this bird on 2 occasions. Once was on Pipeline Road, and one time it was when we were in the Darien at the Canopy Camp. And as you can see from the distribution map over on the right-hand side of the screen, this bird is typically found in the Amazon basin. So our guide was just thrilled when we saw this brownish twistwing. It's a flycatcher, and it's only one of 2 species that are in its genus. But what makes it a really cool bird is it has modified outer primaries, and they're kind of thickened and twisted, and they make this really cool sound when they take off to fly or when they're startled. The first time we saw it, it was in the Darien, and it was just kind of sitting, and I couldn't figure out why the guide was like, oh, this is such a cool bird. And I was like, yeah, it's nice. But when we were on Pipeline Road, we actually startled this bird, and it took off, and the sound that it made was just incredible. We just thought it was so cool, but it happened so quickly, we weren't able to get a recording, unfortunately. So Dave's going to play a recording from eBird so y'all can hear it.
You want to play it again?
It's coming up.
Here we go. So anyway, that's called a brownish twistwing. And if y'all want to look it up on eBird, you'll be able to see, a little better picture of this bird. We weren't able to get great shots of it. This was the best one we were able to get, but it's a really fun bird, and we were very excited to see it.
So as we go ahead and look at birding the Canopy Tower area, one area that we really kind of recommend that people take a look at is Serra Azul. If you have an extra day in your itinerary that you can kind of carve out Serra Azul, it's well worth the time. Canopy Tower is where the red dot is there next to Gamboa. It's approximately about 1 hour and 15 minutes from the tower to Serra Azul. So it's a little bit of a drive, but what I think makes a lot of sense is if you're doing it on your last day before you fly home from Serra Azul, it's only half that distance to get to the airport in Panama City. And you can kind of see the Tocumen International Airport literally right below where Serra Azul is. So again, kind of gives you a little bit of an idea where it is. But again, it's interesting because, first of all, as we go through and we look at Serra Azul, it's a little bit higher elevation than what you get around the tower by several thousand feet. And consequently, you get a lot of different types of species at that, little bit higher elevation that you don't get, on Pipeline or in Gamboa or over by, the tower. Things like the yellow-eared toucanet or, an emerald tanager, for example. But the real reason why you want to go over to Serra Azul is because the fact we found out on our first trip that our guide, Jorge, was friends with a expat who, if I recall, came from Miami, bought a house down in Panama, and started really working on improving their yard. And they've now turned into what's called the hummingbird house. And this place is just an incredible plethora of birds. I've never seen any place anywhere where you can get as close as you can to red-legged honey creepers, shiny honey creepers, you know, you know, uh, green honey creepers, all these different hummingbirds. And the way Jorge likes to do it is he always kind of plans our trip so that we end up having our lunch on this couple's patio, and we have these birds literally eating their lunch 5 feet away from our faces. It is literally just an incredible experience. And again, there's nowhere that we have seen where you can get shots of honey creepers as close as you can at this location. They told us it took several years to be able to go ahead and really get the birds in as thick as what they are now, and they just drain their feeders nonstop.
So now we're going to talk about the Canopy Lodge. Now, we've only stayed at the Canopy Lodge one time, and that was at the end of 2021, beginning of 2022. But we thoroughly enjoyed our stay there, and we definitely want to make it another trip to go back there. It's the closest of the 3 Canopy properties to Costa Rica. It's a little higher in elevation, so it's a little cooler there. The humidity is a little less. So it's a more comfortable, actually. The lodge property, I think, is probably the most comfortable of all of the places. The rooms are they feel a little more like a traditional hotel room.
Resort.
You feel like you're at a resort, beautiful grounds. So in my opinion, the Canopy Lodge, if you have a non-birder spouse, then you want to go to Panama, it would be a great place to take your non-birder spouse because they could hang out at this beautiful property and be catered to while you're out birding. So that would be my recommendation anyway. But you can see a cluster of eBird points here in the left-hand side of the screen where the Canopy Lodge is. And that's where we birded for the 3 days that we were there. The lodge is located in the Anton Valley, which is a beautiful cloud rainforest region. And it, again, slightly higher elevation, a little cooler at night, surrounded by mountains and lush greenery. Lots of bird species there. We had owls at night, and it was just a really beautiful place, a gorgeous destination. The lodge itself has a beautiful stream that goes through it where you're going to get birds like the buff-rumped warbler, or you can also get dusky-faced tanager, fulvous vented euphonia. We had a dull-mantled antbird in that area, birds that we really didn't see in other areas of Panama. So it just kind of gives you a nice, diversification.
The Anton Valley area, it is the area kind of around the Canopy Lodge. And you can kind of see just by the photographs that, again, you got more hills, more mountains. It opens up, to an even wider variety of species that you have, access to. So overall, we found species like a wedge-tailed grass finch, a mouse-colored tarantula. These were birds that we've not seen anywhere else ever. So again, you're definitely, up at the lodge, you're getting access to some birds that you're not going to see in other places. The other thing that we, we're kind of impressed with is the fact that, these guides are extremely well connected. And as such, they have access to lots of private property. And I still remember, they were talking about that they were going to get us a crested owl. And I was just so excited about the idea of getting a crested owl. And literally, they took us to this private property where they had literally a secret entrance on how to get into the private property. They walked us right over and said, there's the owls. And, just had, incredible views. And again, this is where it kind of helps having that local knowledge. we talked last year on our Costa Rica, talk about how local knowledge is just so important. And again, this was something where they knew that these crested owls were hanging out on their friend's property, and went over and basically took us right to them.
And so now that takes us to our last property, which is Canopy Camp. And again, I mentioned this is my most favorite. I loved the Canopy Camp. We made our first trip there just a couple months ago, back at the end of December, and spent I guess we just spent New Year's Day there as well. And it took us close to 5 hours to drive from the Canopy Tower or Panama City area down to the Darien Canopy Camp. And, I'd heard that, that it's a horrible drive, and we'd seen some posts on YouTube and some podcasts that, oh, it's a horrible road, it's a horrible drive. And while 5 hours is a long drive, first of all, the road was not horrible. I mean, it's not I-75, but it's not horrible. And they made so many frequent stops, and we got so many great birds that we didn't see anywhere else in the country on that drive down, that it totally made the drive worth it. And so I think that you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner kind of the route that we took with all the eBird stops along the way to get birds. On our way down, we got multiple lifers like the piedwater tyrant. I didn't even honestly know that bird existed till we pulled up to this stop, and I just thought it was the coolest little flycatcher. We also had white-eared conebill, really cool bird. Didn't see it anywhere else but the drive down. And they, like I said, they made frequent stops. They made a bathroom stop, and I think for some people they even made lunch stops. But Dave won't let me eat when we do these trips, so
You don't need to eat.
yeah, we're too busy birding. But really, the main reason why we wanted to go down to the Darien was because we wanted to see some of the beautiful birds that come up from South America, with the Darien being so close to Colombia. And one of our main targets was this ruby topaz hummingbird. This bird shows up at the Darien camp between December and March. And it's typically the only place in Panama. This area is the only place in Panama you're going to see this really cool hummingbird. Just such spectacular colors. I mean, I took probably 1,000 photos of this bird, and every photo, it looked different. This just happens to be the one where you can see the ruby on top and kind of the goldish topazy throat. But I mean, this bird is really a stunning bird. So the Canopy Camp, this is kind of some pictures of what you see. We pulled up, and you can see on the right, they have rocking chairs, and they've got feeders that surround that area. And that's where all the hummingbirds and honey creepers, banana quits, there were some mannequins that came into there, monkeys, just everything comes into that area. And you can sit in these wonderful little rocking chairs and just watch the birds. It was raining, didn't stop the birds at all, but we stayed dry because we were under this shelter. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can kind of see across all the way to like the dining room table area. That's where you eat all of your meals. Food there was fabulous, great food. They kept us very well fed, and they did a great job of accommodating special requests, any dietary special needs that you have. They just really did a nice job. I have to admit, we were a little nervous about what the tents were going to be like, because we kept hearing you're going to be staying in a tent. And so the one thing I will say is very hot and humid in the Darien, more hot and humid than any of the other properties. So staying in a tent seemed like a little daunting to me, but I was pleasantly surprised. They had hardwood floors. They have a nice cover over the tent. You stay very dry. They have power in the tents, so you can charge all of your things. They've got this huge oscillating fan that kept things very cool. Because we were a little nervous about how cool we were going to be. We found these little portable fans that we kept right next to our bedside and used those. And really, we stayed very comfortable the whole time. The beds were great, probably more
awesome.
more comfortable than any of the a lot of beds that we stay at in some of the hotels that we go to. And you can see the view off of the back of our platform. We had tinamou and owls, and it was great. Now, behind me in the top picture, you see kind of a green building. That's your bathroom. You just walk around the outside of the tent and you have your own private bathroom there. Hot water, flush toilet, extremely clean, very comfortable. We just loved it. Like I said, my favorite place, one of my favorite places I've been to in Central America. I really thought it was special.
So again, when you think about Canopy Camp, it's situated literally in the middle of the Darien jungle, which opens up a whole nother, dimension to birding in North America, because you get so many birds that come over, from Colombia and from South America that you just don't see anywhere else in North America. And ultimately, if you're trying to build your AOU list or your North America list, like Margie was talking about, you've got to get down to Canopy Camp, because that's an area that's going to be very specialized, and you're going to get a lot of birds that you might not see elsewhere. And again, when we think about, things like a king vulture, that's a bird that you can theoretically get throughout a large part of Central America. But the problem is they're very, very hard to target. And whenever we've seen them in the past, it's usually just been kind of like, you're driving down the road. Oh, there's one right now. And you quick slam on the brakes and you hop out of the car and you get a couple pictures, But they've actually set up a feeding station at Canopy Camp, which is bringing in king vultures to feed. So your odds of seeing a king vulture and getting a good view of a king vulture is substantially better at Canopy Camp than anywhere else that I've seen in Central America. So again, the birding there is just phenomenal. And again, there's one difference between birding at Canopy Camp versus Canopy Tower and Canopy Lodge. Canopy, Camp has a birdmobile too, which you can see us sitting in the Canopy Camp birdmobile. But they also use a lot of boats. And the boats, I would almost call them like these long motorized canoes. Because again, you can see, they're relatively narrow. But this just opens up a whole new world of birding and a whole lot more areas that you can cover, via a motorized boat. And ultimately, it's kind of one of those things that it just really adds to the overall experience when you can sit and drive down these rivers and see all of the villages scattered along the riverbanks, see people out, bathing or swimming in the rivers. Again, these boats, they basically serve as a water taxi, and it allows people in remote areas to get into more populated areas or to other remote areas, maybe to visit family. So, consequently, it really, to us, it just added a whole new dimension, to birding in Panama, where we got to see things that we would have never seen otherwise. Now, back kind of on the birdmobile, if Pipeline Road is the prime birding destination around Canopy Tower, Camino El Salto would be, in my opinion, the prime birding location, down at Canopy Camp. And it's this long dirt road that runs through the jungle that connects to a remote, village, at the end of the road. And, we would go ahead and, we made multiple trips over to El Salto, where we would hop up in the top of the, birdmobile And then we'd be driving down a dirt road until we would come across the flock. And as soon as we came across the flock, we would usually, hop out, work the flock, or even more importantly, if Eliezer, heard one of the birds on our target list amongst the 50 to 100 birds that were singing and calling simultaneously, he would be able to pull that one bird out and say, here's your target. And we would stop and we get out and we would work the flock until we got on the bird and we were able to photograph the bird. Again, their knowledge of different bird calls and songs is really nothing short of astounding. Now, on this trip that we just made, we had several birds that we really, really wanted to target. And one of our top targets was to see a pearl kite. It's this little kite. It just is a cute little raptor that I don't know, for whatever reason, I just really wanted to see one. And we were fortunate. We got to see several of them, and a few of them from pretty decent viewpoints. So again, there's just so many interesting birds down in the Darien that, like I said, I just can't speak highly enough about the bird diversity down there. And one of the birds that we didn't even have on our radar when we first showed up down there was something called a spot-breasted woodpecker. And again, this is a really cool little woodpecker that, if you look at their range on eBird, there's just like a few little pockets that they show up in. They're not a really common bird at all in Panama, and for that matter, anywhere in North America. Yet, there were locations down there where they were fairly plentiful. And one of the things that we thought was really, kind of cool about Canopy is they partner with a lot of local guides in these remote villages. So, you take a boat, 30, 40 minutes, up or down a river to a little village. And, we'd be met by one of the local birders there, who would then take us and would walk us right on over to where, the spot-breasted woodpeckers, had holes and they were popping out of their holes and easily seen. Same situation with, the orange-crowned oriole. Again, we just kind of really enjoyed the idea that Canopy is trying to go into these villages and hire locals to basically instill in them a sense of interest in birds and protecting, the wildlife down there. Back on the Birdmobile, we would go ahead and every day we'd take different dirt roads that we would just kind of drive down and, just come across, all sorts of interesting birds that, we'd get great views of, whether it be like a capped heron, or, the barbet, the spot-crowned barbet that we've got pictured here in the picture. And while, there are raptors all throughout Panama, I personally kind of felt like there were a lot more raptors, down in the Darien. And again, we got to see things like the Savannah hawk down there, black collared hawk. A collared forest falcon is one that we've heard numerous times in Costa Rica and in Panama. But it wasn't until we got down to the Darien that we actually finally, got to see a collared forest falcon. Again, very, very common to hear them throughout Central America. A lot tougher to actually get to see one.
So this takes us to our main target for our trip in December and January, the harpy eagle. We really wanted to see this huge predator. This bird feeds on monkeys and sloths, among other things. And while they're found in several countries, we've kind of discovered through talking to other birders and doing some research that in the Darien, it's the best place to kind of be able to target seeing them. So we're corresponding with Carlos down at the Canopy properties and saying, when is the best time for us to be able to see a harpy eagle on a nest? And he said, come on down, we will find you a harpy eagle nest. And so needless to say, the night before our trip to see the harpy eagle. We were pretty nervous. Can't say either one of us slept really well. We were very excited that we were going to get to see this bird, because they told us that the harpy actually had babies on the nest, and we were going to be able to possibly see this bird feeding the baby. So we started dark and early. They actually had the cook there at the camp before 5 a.m. with a hot breakfast for us. We took a 45-minute car ride down to the city, and we walked to the end, and we discovered that you can't, the boat captains are not allowed to run on the river before sunrise. So here we're waiting for sunrise to be official, for our captain to arrive and take us down the river to our next spot, which it's an incredible boat ride. We're actually on the boat here, and we're looking for birds. We made a few stops, but we had a 45-minute boat ride, so we had to get to our location because our adventure for the day was really just starting. Then after we arrived at this remote village, they loaded us into a pickup truck, and we took a 30-minute truck ride. So now we've taken a 30-minute ride to the boat, we've taken a 45-minute boat ride, and we've taken another 30-minute ride in the back of a truck through all these different villages. And as we're stopping at all of these little villages, they are having to get out and give the police officer in town all of our papers to make sure that we should be there. And so we really felt very safe as we're going through the towns. And we would stop and bird from the back of the truck. So finally we pulled up at the entrance to this big muddy dirt trail, and we're greeted by some of the locals, and they had brought horses for us because the path is pretty long and we're getting pretty old and it's very muddy. And so we'd arranged that we could do some of the trip back into the jungle by horseback. So our guides took us back down this trail by horseback. And we had probably about, I would say about an hour into the jungle and did some birding. And we arrived at the entrance to the national park. And you can kind of see the park headquarters in the middle picture. Then on the left here, you can see Dave, and he's contemplating seeing the harpy eagle here with his eyes closed, taking a quick nap before we ventured out into the jungle, where we were literally pushed and pulled down a muddy, steep trail to get to the nest. And we get to the nest, and this is what we saw. I mean, it was just incredible. We think she had like a sloth or maybe a small monkey, and she was feeding the baby there. And we got to sit there and watch this. And it was quite the adventure. It was really, really exciting. Our guides were great. They maneuvered us to just the perfect location so that we could watch this, because when we first got there, we couldn't really see all that well. And I mean, they literally pushed me up and down a pretty muddy, steep slope to get me safely to a location where we could see these birds. So it was wonderful, very, very exciting. And of course, there's a great group of people that got us there. You can see that we have 4 of the indigenous people from the village. 2 of them were the boys that led our horses. And then one of them carried our backpack with our lunch and snacks and water and all of that, so that we didn't have to lug that through the jungle. And then the other young man was kind of standing next to the guy with the
second from left.
Yeah, standing next to the guy with the scope. Really great young man, and he is learning all about the birds in the Darien, and he kind of scopes it all out and tells our guides where they need to go to get the great birds. And He's trying to learn English and he really wants to be a bird guide. And I just really connected with this young man. He was really, really sweet. And then at the end of our trip, we had this, we were met at the beginning where they met us with horses. This time, the ladies in the village had set up a table full of wonderful things that are all handcrafted by the indigenous people there. And here, hopefully you guys can see this. It's a mask that's a harpy eagle. And they've made it out of some of the local grasses and they color it and it's all completely handmade. They also had little baskets like this one that you could buy. I think I paid like $30 total for the two things. They did take US dollars. And we just felt more than anything, I mean, it's great to get a souvenir, but we felt it was important to support the locals since we're in their home and they're being so gracious to allow us there. Another thing that we did, and I'll just mention this on a side note, I spoke to the lady at Canopy Camp when I knew we were going to be going to some of these indigenous villages. And I asked her if there was anything we could bring. And she said, oh, absolutely. She said, please bring some personal hygiene things and I brought socks that had all kinds of cool things on them for the kids. And then I think we bought some toothbrush and toothpaste and stuff like that. And then we picked up a couple soccer balls for a couple of the villages and brought those. And she's going to make sure that all those the people of the villages get those. So that's something else you can think about when you go to these places that, you can contribute and kind of help and feel like you're giving back to them.
So again, a lot of people kind of think, well, dinner time, birding's over, let's go ahead and call it a day and, put our feet up. But you got to remember, especially in Central America and Panama, there's some fantastic birding that can be done after dinner. And again, we got to sit there and, watch this striped owl for quite a while, just sitting there, calling and, hooting back and forth. And we got to watch, this great putu go through and, he was feeding on insects and moths near this light. That was really cool. And if you look at this screen here, it makes it look like that the Choco screech owl, which is a very rare owl, was actually taken during the daytime, but this was actually taken just before sunrise. It was just starting to get light and we overexposed the picture to actually get the photograph. So it makes it look like it was taken midday. The sun was not up yet when we took that Choco screech owl photo. So again, the key is, you can bird at night too. If you ask to arrange for that, they will go ahead and take you on out. And you'll see the tropical screech owl, which we think was kind of interesting because his left eye looks perfectly normal, but you'll notice the right eye is a different color and the pupil looks like it has been damaged, possibly in maybe a fight or something of that nature. So again, obviously something happened to his right eye. But again, you can't think about going to Central America without thinking about other things other than birds. I know it's hard to think about things other than birds, but there are some incredible mammals down there, and you get to see things like the Jeffries tamarin, howler monkeys, almost at every location that you bird, and we even got to see the very shy and timid night monkey, who you can kind of see peeking out of the crack there during the middle of the day when they were trying to sleep. But again, there's other mammals down there other than monkeys too. Agoutis on the left are a very common, large rodent that you kind of see over a lot of the different properties. And coatis or coati Mondays, as some people call them. Again, very common, very popular. But when I think about non-monkey mammals down there, you got to think about the sloth. And they've got 3 different types of sloth down there that you can see. This is a photo that Tammy took of an adult with a little baby sloth there, and I just thought it was such a cute photograph there. that we had to go ahead and throw that in. So, overall, if you go down to Panama, or for that matter, most places in Central America, you got to remember, the jungle doesn't offer ideal views of birds. Sometimes the birds just pop right out and they will go ahead and be visible to you. But this is a photograph of a rosy thrush tanager that, oh gosh, I bet we probably spent an hour trying to work a couple of these tanagers to get a photograph.
We've tried both trips to Panama to get good pictures of this bird.
And this is the best photo that we have gotten to date of a rosy thrush tanager. So the key is, you got to remember, it is the jungle. The forest can be really, really thick in places. And sometimes, you just don't get a great view. Sometimes you don't get any view. And we were on, a road down off of Canopy Camp in the Darien, when we started to hear this song. So immediately I pulled out my iPhone and started recording that. And, it was, a great recording, very easy to identify that bird as a marbled wood quail. We tried to coax it out of the jungle, and we got it right to the edge where you could tell he was probably just like 6 or 12 inches in the brush. And we thought, oh, he's going to come out. We had our cameras ready and waiting, and he turned around, he walked back in, and we never saw it. So again, you got to remember, sometimes you're only going to hear the birds. But again, if they're a really cool sounding bird like the marbled wood quail, that's still pretty cool. So again, when we originally, kind of got into the fall last year, we had a lot of personal things going on with our family earlier in the year, where, our son Patrick, was really sick back early in the year, and we'd kind of lost several months of birding, because of that. And, we started thinking about, okay, is there any chance that we could do a three-peat and be number one in the AOU for a third year in a row, and be number one in North America for a third year in a row? But we were really pretty far behind as we got into the fall. So we started kind of thinking about it and thinking about, okay, how could we potentially do this? And we squeezed out a quick 3-day trip down to Costa Rica, where we strategically planned a location that would provide a lot of birds that we knew we wouldn't be seeing in Panama. And then we figured we were going to finish out our year, starting, in the afternoon of December 26th, when we arrived in Panama, through December 31st, we were just going to, bird really hard. We were going to bird from pre-dawn, to well, after dark most evenings. And we knew our guides. We had guided with Jorge before. We had guided with Eliezer before. Again, these guys are phenomenal.
Fabulous.
They know their birds, and they have more energy than Tammy and I do. So again, it was a perfect match. We would go through every night. We would sit down and do a recap of everything that we had seen for the day. We would go ahead and kind of regroup and say, all right, what birds are still left on our target list? They would devise a plan for the next day on what we were going to do and how we were going to target, the remaining birds on the list. Again, I can't speak highly enough about the job that Jorge and Eliezer had done for us. And consequently, when push came to shove, and midnight rolled around on December 31st, we had skyrocketed up almost 20 spots in the rankings, and we were able to finish number one in both North America and in the AOU, thanks to the job that Jorge and Eliezer did.
Yeah, that's great.
So again, just very, very appreciative of that. So, again, as I look back on our trip to Panama, all I can say is, Tammy and I are really looking forward to our next trip to Panama. Next time, we want to do all 3 properties consecutively, because I really would be curious to see how many birds we could go ahead and and basically get, if we did all 3 properties and gave each property, a reasonable amount of time. So,
and I want to say that is not my email address. So if you use that email address, I don't know what Tammy McQuade you will get, but it will not be me. Mine is Tammy McQuade at me.com. But
That's
my
my fault.
husband never emails me, so he doesn't.
I don't email her. I just yell for her and she comes running. Yeah.
Oh.
So bottom line is, sorry about that typo. Again, Tammy McQuade at me.com. Again, I've got Canopy Tower's information down there. They also have a toll-free number. Obviously, we're happy to answer any questions or any concerns that you might have about birding there. And, again, we can't speak highly enough about our experiences, both trips down there. And for any birder that wants to try it, I think you'll love it. So with that, we want to go ahead and, open it up for any questions that you might have.
Right. And I went ahead and typed those emails in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. I'm just so jealous. I just want to get on a plane right now and head off down to Panama. You make it so incredibly exciting. And your photographs and your narratives, just wonderful. Thank you so much. The first question is, do you go on your own and hire guides or with a group tour? And I think you sort of answered that, but it did look like you were with other people.
We were only with our guides. We had a private guide for the entire time. The picture where you saw us with other people, those were the local indigenous people that would assist in getting us to our birds.
They were.
But Dave and I bird way too hard to bird with a group because
they would not like us at the end.
Nobody would like us when it was all over because we probably bird 12 to 15-hour days the entire time. So we're up before sunrise and we are not stopping until probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night most nights. So we go at it pretty hard. So people in groups would not like us. We wouldn't make friends. So we do private, but that's the great thing about the Canopy Camp and Tower and Lodge. You can go there with another group. So you could take I don't know if Wings or one of them might do a event. They do tours down there where they come with one of their guides and go down there and utilize the Canopy guides and Canopy properties in kind of a combination. You could also go down as a private individual and go to the Canopy properties, and you could bird as a group with other people who go down to the Canopy properties as singles. And you don't have to pay for a private guide that way. It's kind of all included in the price. Or you can pay a little extra and get private guides, which is what Dave and I do. So it's just Dave and I and our guide, and they totally cater to us the whole time. And for us, when we have such a short amount of time and we're trying to get so many birds, it just works out better if it's just us because they focus on just our needs. So it's a little selfish, but but for now, that's how we do it.
So actually, somebody just popped in with a question. If you wanted to go, I think it was, I can't find the question again, but
actually I saw it. I mean, basically, for a novice birder,
yeah,
I don't know if it really, makes that big of a difference. They each have a lot of easy birds that you can view. They all.
What was the question?
For a novice birder, which is the best location to go to?
So Canopy Tower, you're climbing over 50 stairs because the tower.
We do have a trip coming up next year to Panama. Our Audubon Society is putting one on, and I believe we are doing the Canopy Tower. Is that correct, Karen?
No.
No, we're not.
I think you're going
in that area. You're going to Pipeline Road.
Yeah, you're going to Gamboa and Pipeline Road.
So you're not staying at the Canopy Tower, but the Canopy Tower is mean, it's a great location. It's all inclusive. The guides there are bar none the best, but there's a lot of stairs. So that's a downside, I think. The Canopy Lodge is the cushiest, in my opinion. You're not climbing a lot of stairs. The hotel, they're more like hotel rooms, beautiful accommodations. And I think probably the climate is the nicest there. So I don't, but the Darien is still my favorite. It's probably, like I said, it's hot and very humid and very remote locations, but the adventure was just, I mean, you saw the boat rides and the horseback rides. And I mean, I just felt like I was in a National Geographic movie or something. It was fabulous. I just love it. I can't wait to go back there.
So
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you could choose any of the 3 properties and you'll be happy.
Oh yeah.
somebody asked, did you drive or hire drivers? It sounds like you only look like you only.
Yeah, they provide all of that. When you book through Canopy, they provide all of it.
And what we noticed is that, they actually provide a driver for the guide too. So the guide can be sitting there looking out the window and trying to find birds as you're driving down the road.
That's great.
Yeah, which again just helps to increase what all you see.
Somebody
now again, if it's going to be a short drive of 10 minutes or something like that, no. Lots of times
they'll drive.
Yeah, they'll drive. But if it's a longer drive, then they'll usually include a driver with you.
Somebody asked, can you get along if you don't speak Spanish? But it sounds to me like English is.
Yeah, we had no trouble at all. In fact, the only time we were around people who spoke no English was when we did the Harpy Eagle, and the young men that we were with did not speak hardly any English at all, but it's an indigenous tribe that's pretty isolated area. And the one young man that, like I said, I really connected with, he was so cute. He really wanted to learn English. And he could ask me where I was from, but that was all I understood because I don't speak Spanish very well. And he spoke an indigenous language, I think. And but he did ask where I was from. And so I said, Florida. And he kind of looked at me. So I took out my iPhone and I'm showing him on the Google map where Florida is. And he goes, oh, Miami. And I got a kick out of that. He knew Miami. So
all of the Canopy guides are fluent.
Yeah.
I mean, their
they don't
English
even really have much of an accent.
Their English is as good as mine.
Yeah, very easy to understand.
Yeah.
So Kylie Wilson wants to know, have you ever done pelagics out of Panama?
No, and actually it's in the back of my mind just because of my love of pelagics, but there's not a ton of new birds that we could get there. There's a couple, but again, for the cost, if you've done a lot of pelagics out of say San Diego, I'm not 100% sure that you're going to get a lot of new variety. And I actually, last time we were down there, I spent a fair amount of time actually going through and analyzing the pelagic data. And I think there was a grand total of 2 lifers that I could potentially get.
Yeah.
So not a lot.
I got some very detailed questions here. Kylie Wilson also wants to know, a friend wants to know if there's a standard amount for tipping guides. I think this is almost too specific for here.
Well, there is, and I don't have it memorized, but the beautiful thing about the Canopy Camp is on their website, they actually have a page about how you should tip and what their recommendations are. And, Dave and I work our guides way too hard to not be good to them because we put them through the ringer. So, everybody can, they give you a baseline and then you can go from there.
Yeah, we obviously go above the baseline because we push them above the baseline.
They're putting in 15-hour days for us. So,
Yeah, I think you also answered the question. Did you have birding guides during transfer to another property? And it sounded like you did.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we had around the tower area, we had Jorge Pinata. and he birded with us nonstop the entire time. And then from the time we left Panama City, went down to the camp, and then got back to Panama City, we had Eliezer.
Yeah. I mean, all the guides are great. They have a lot of guides down there, and they all do a great job. And I think they all speak English. And we just met those two on our first trip and connected with them, and they understood our kind of birding, trying to list and get as many species. And, you know, a lot of people want to try to get the best picture and have the best view. And we're kind of like, show us the bird and let's go. So they understood what we wanted, so we asked for them again. So, but you know, there's lots of guides down there, and they're all equally as great.
So somebody asked, did you ever feel unsafe? And dovetailing with that, I want to ask you, I don't know where I saw this. It might have even been National Geographic, but isn't part of Darien where a lot of illegal, I mean, I feel badly for them. I don't even want to call them illegal, but desperate people are trying to get out of wherever they are. And they go through Darien, and it looks like a lot of them don't make it. They die en route. It's so.
Yeah, so that was something, and actually it is on the U.S. State Department website where they urge caution down in the Darien, which is why we wanted to take, you know, a couple minutes and just talk about the fact that I can tell you, I've been to our border, I've been close to their border. Their border, I feel, is a lot safer than our border.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at it, it goes back to the fact that they know everybody traveling through the area, and they don't want drugs going through their area. So again, that's why we had to stop and basically take, 5 minutes and register at every little village, so they know, okay, these are all guides here. They would show their paperwork and their licenses or whatever. They would show our passports and say, all right, we're going to bird, Darien National Park now. And they would basically, kind of clear us, so that they would know that we're okay. We've got all of our paperwork in order. We're supposed to be there.
And then when we'd leave, we'd have to stop and tell them we're leaving the area. So we felt very safe. The Canopy Camp is in a great area, very really sweet people that all live around it, lots of little homesteads. And I never felt unsafe. And they have someone on the properties that, stays awake all night and watches and listens. And
well, you also have to remember that birding is bringing in commerce to an area that doesn't have a lot of opportunity. And Canopy is doing a phenomenal job at trying to incorporate locals from these different villages into their birding. And consequently, they're making a lot more money than they would make in other possible occupations. To basically make them incentivize, so to speak, for the village to look out for us.
Yeah, because
the village doesn't want anything to happen.
They'd have a villager as the boat captain. They'd have another villager who was our driver. They had villagers that would take us to the birds. We ate at
push you up the hills, right?
Push me up the hills. Literally, they were pushing me up the hill.
Yeah, I mean, I felt I never ever once felt
That's
unsafe.
Great to know. That's really great. I thank you so much. This has been fascinating, and I can hardly wait to get there. Now I got to figure out how to do it. But we do have a trip coming up. And Sarah, do you know something about that? I know it's going to be, here we go.
Yeah, I was actually trying to pull up Aaron's thing a minute ago. Hold on, give me 1 second.
So Aaron Virgin is a very good birder that's based in Sarasota, and he runs the Christmas bird count for Sarasota County. He's an excellent birder, and he's planning this trip.
And
just went off the
it's on the
screen.
website though.
It is on the website. Yeah, I would send people there for the specifics of exactly where they're going. He did have one meeting already where they did a presentation on it. But I would reach out to Aaron because he can give you, there's a whole PowerPoint of everywhere that they're going and exactly where they're staying and everything that's going on. It's also being led by Patty Ford. She works with Holbrook now, and that's the president of the Manatee Audubon. And they're working together to set this all up.
Very cool. So next month on May 12th, we have Megan Swar, who is actually now based in Sarasota, but she has she's an architect. She's a young, very talented architect who's going to talk about her gorilla conservation work in Rwanda with the Ellen DeGeneres campus of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund.